Okay, we're live. Okay, making sure all my little buttons are closed here. Good evening, everybody. We are so excited to have you here this evening. It is a cold and snowy Saturday night where I am. Hopefully it's not cold and snowy where you are, but cozy up with a tea, appropriate Saturday evening beverage of your choice. Settle in. We have lots of really good stories tonight. Doc will be visiting with our good friend, Kate Dernocoeur, who is the author of Street Sense. And we are so proud to have her sitting in our seat tonight. So I am going to monitor questions. If you have any for Kate or Doc, drop them in the stream below and we'll get to them. Otherwise, kick back and enjoy the stories. Take it away, Doc.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be with you again. And I am delighted to be with an old friend of mine, Kate Dernocoeur. And we're going to spend some time learning a little bit about Kate and her adventures in EMS and fire and her adventures in writing great resources that some of us have utilized extensively in teaching our EMS professionals something about how to deal with people as opposed to how to treat wounds. So, Kate, good evening.
Hi, how are you, Doc?
Yourself.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's go back to your initial in what we call EMS. I think back in those days, we didn't call it EMS necessarily. Where did it all start?
Oh, okay. The really, really far back beginning for me actually was in December of 1973. When I was with the National Outdoor Leadership School on a winter course. It was a 2-week winter camping course in Wyoming, 35 below every night for the first 5 nights. It was great. I was just turning 20 on that trip. And one of my instructors on that trip, we were sitting around the campfire one day at one night and we're talking about stuff. And he said, yeah, I just took this new course. I think they're calling it emergency medical technician. And in that moment, I vividly remember snapping my fingers going, that's what I want to do. That is what I want to do. And I held that, took until 1976 to get into an EMT program because I was going back and forth to college. But I knew that's what I wanted to do right as soon as I heard about it. I was already with a mountain rescue group in Colorado and had my little 8-hour first aid card, but man, that EMT stuff hit me right there. Boom.
What were you pursuing in college at the time, out of curiosity?
So I actually got my college degree in journalism. I didn't know growing up that I was going to be a writer. It's kind of a long story, but I got to write the weekly recap at a summer camp in 1973. And I'd been a camper at that camp, and every Sunday, Mr. Brown would get up with the Chippy the Chipmunk report. And when I went back as a counselor, they didn't have it anymore. So I said to the director, I said, where's Chippy? You got to have Chippy. He said, all right, you do it. So I'm like, oh, okay. And so for 8 weeks that summer, people would laugh when I said something funny, and I'd get up in front of 400 people every Sunday night and get the microphone and recap the week. And they'd laugh and when they should, and they cried when they should, and they clapped when they should. And I left that job thinking, well, maybe I should be a writer. So one thing led to another, and I ended up in journalism school.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And then from Vail, you went to Denver when?
Okay, so I actually was living in Vail with the Vail Mountain Rescue. Then I went back to college. Then I went back to Vail. Couldn't find a job as a writer, so I became a police, fire, EMS, or ambulance dispatcher for not very long, because then I got into EMT school it was 1977. Yeah, 1977. And I went to St. Anthony's in Denver, St. Anthony Hospital in Denver for the EMT program, the sort of straight through 3 or 4 months straight through program, and started working on a private ambulance, and then went right into paramedic school and finished that in January of 1979 and got hired right on at the City and County of Denver Paramedic Division, also known as DG.
Good service, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
a good training program.
It was the best.
Yeah,
we
the
were-
Denver General Training Program had a great reputation back
Right.
in the day. And I don't know if it still does now, but I know back in those days,
Right.
it was one of the most highly respected programs in the country.
Yeah, it was. We were
Yeah.
at the tip of the spear, inventing it as we went along.
Yeah. Okay, so then all of a sudden you get into writing because you take your journalism degree and say, I'm going to write something. What prompted you to start the writing of Street Sense?
Ooh, what got me to write Street Sense was, let me just backpedal just a little bit, because what got me there was this little bit, which was Jim Dernocoeur and I went to New Orleans for a conference in 1979. We had been dating and we thought that'd be fun. So we were walking down the hall and there was a little card table with a little hand lettered sign that said, "Coming soon, Journal of Emergency Medical Services." And there was these two guys standing there. One of them was tall and bald. So of course there was Jim Page, and then Keith Griffith, who was his editor. And I stopped and said, "Well, hey, I have a degree in journalism and I've been a paramedic for a while. I've been in the business for several years. If there's ever anything you think I could write for you, let me know," which is not the way to get a job. But Keith leaned in and he said, "Why don't you give me some ideas?" So I had 6 for him by the end of the next session, stopped by the table, dropped it off, and he called me the next week with an assignment for money. And I thought, oh, I will be a writer after all. Ooh, this is good. So I combined the two. I put EMS and writing together. And then so within the next couple of years, working at the city at DG, I had amazing experiences with people like Bob Marlin or Jim Dernocoeur, Craig Corey, Art Kanowitz, some of the best out there in the world. They were my partners and teachers. And I would watch them on a scene and say, how did he just do that? What was the deal? And I would try to parse what I had seen successfully happen. I would look at stuff that didn't go so well and try to figure out what that was all about. And this idea of Street Sense started formulating in my head that when in my training, both in EMT school and paramedic school in those days, the only people there to teach were the doctors and nurses from the hospitals. They were the ones that knew the clinical stuff. So we learned medicine really well, but they didn't have a clue what our world was. So I invented this thing in my head called Street Sense. And I thought, all right, it has three components. It's communication, because if you can't communicate with a stranger in crisis effectively and safely in the first minute, you're going to be lost. And then communication safety. Safety in those days was not the priority it is today. In fact, in those days, we were taught by our doctors and nurses that the 3 most important things you do on the scene is check the ABCs. So I would go into scenes going ABCs, ABCs. You know, nowadays it's like safety is number 1, but that has been a transition that came. And then the third component of Street Sense is control. So controlling everything from scenes with lots of people to your own stress, to managing death and dying, to controlling legal risk management. It's a really broad spectrum of control, but yeah, I'm pretty proud of my little book. It's done okay.
It's done very, very well. And it's taught a lot of people some valuable stuff. One of the things that as an educator, what I've found useful about the book is everybody talks about situational awareness, which you referred to as safety, but it's very hard to teach. And Street Sense addresses it pretty well in terms of these are the things you need to be watching for your own welfare.
Right.
Now, Street Sense is now in its, I think you said, 4th edition. 4th edition.
Yeah.
It's come out. How recently did it come out?
It just came out earlier this year.
Go ahead. You can show it. Go ahead. Yeah. There we are. There's Street Sense. Cool.
4th edition. Brandy new.
Artwork on the cover. I like it better than the original artwork.
Oh, I love this cover. It's very modern. It looks like a graphic, a graphic comics. I think they call it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what has been the evolution of the wisdom in Street Sense from its original form to where it is now?
Thank you for that. That's really a cool question, because actually a lot of the core information in the book is such human nature stuff, that there's stuff that's so solidly still there. that it hasn't really changed a lot, but the writing got better because in the middle of all it, I got a master's degree in creative nonfiction. So when I was rewriting the 4th edition, I kept saying, oh, that's a horrible paragraph. So I kept rewriting. But between edition number 1 and number 2, and between edition number 2 and 3, 2 things came along. I can never remember which order. One was that we got into gangs in our culture, and we didn't have to deal with that in the 1st edition, but all of a sudden there was a lot of gang related and rising safety issues in terms of the people wanting to hurt each other and us. And then and the next one was the evolution of some of the drug industries, stuff like crack cocaine came along. And I may have those swapped because I can never remember which. But for the 4th edition, now 1st to 2nd edition was 1984 to 1990, came out the 2nd edition. 1996 was the 3rd edition. So then you go 20 years between the 3rd and the 4th edition. And I had sort of stepped away from EMS for a while, and then I came back in 2011 in kind of a big way. We'll probably talk about that. But things like active shooters had come along, things like social media and a lot of that stuff had come along. So there's been a lot of updating in terms of some of the things that I needed to talk about in terms of those things.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you and I have lived through EMS going through various phases. When I started on the street, I never put gloves on for anything.
No, I didn't either.
Then all of a sudden HIV came along.
Right.
And what do you mean you're not putting gloves on? And right. Now here we are in the middle of a pandemic. And now we got the whole 9 yards. We've got masks, we've got gloves, we've got social distancing. So we go through various evolutionary cycles. Mm-hmm. Something you and I chatted about earlier. Well, first of all, I applaud. I think you need to repeat what you did recently insofar as Fire Academy and so on. Yeah. Well, you went through the Fire Academy in what year?
Yeah, all right. I backed away from EMS. One of the biggest regrets of my life is letting my paramedic certification go in 2003. So then I kind of faded. And then by 2011, I had been doing a lot of remote travel. And I was always that person who would say, hey, I've got experience with EMS if you need anything, so that maybe I should get some credentials. And I was also getting active with a K9 unit for a search and rescue here in Michigan, which I'm still active with. I walked 5 miles with them today. So for that reason, I went back to the wilderness EMT course at the National Outdoor Leadership School in Wyoming in 2011. So I got back from that and I thought, well, I'm sitting in my office up here in my, I'm 5 miles out of town and I want to use this. I don't want it just to sit here. So I went down to the firehouse and I walked in and I talked to the chief and I said, hey, I used to be a paramedic. I'm very experienced there. And I just got an EMT and I'm available. I'm here. I write at home. I know how hard it is to get volunteers. And he looked at me and he said, well, you're at Ada Fire. You have to be all or nothing. And I went, what do you mean? He said, well, you need to be a firefighter. And I went, okay. And he spent the next 2 hours trying to talk me out of it because I think he looked at this woman who was not young and thought,
didn't know you well, did he?
What have we done?
He didn't understand you at all.
He was so freaked out. And I ended up being a firefighter for Ada, Michigan, and a great group of guys until January of 2019. I loved it. I was surprised how much I really enjoyed the fireside and all of that. And being up on a roof and being in bunker gear and, trudging through the snow and the ice and whatever. And teaching a little bit about this and that. I kind of kept it quiet about my background for, like I told him, I said, this is what you need to know about me, but I don't want the other guys to even have an idea because that's death, in the firehouse if you come in with like hey, I'm cool. So I never did, but I think they've caught on by now. So.
Very cool. You still with the volunteer fire? You still with the
fire? No, I
department?
retired in January last year, 2019. My body was getting, like, I hate to say it, but Medicare age and Medicare age bodies are not really geared for frontline firefighting. So getting 50 pounds of gear on my little tiny body was adding 50% to my body weight just before I picked up a charge line, so it was hard. It was physical.
Yeah, I have pretty severe lumbar spine problems thanks to firefighting and EMS. So
Yeah.
I think it catches up to us eventually. What I don't think people know is that you and I kind of known each other for a while, in that when I ran the American College of Pre-Hospital Medicine, you were one of my faculty people. And we basically built the course around street sense, which
Right.
I thought was cool.
Right.
Of course, I was a fool in 1991 deciding I was going to do internet-based education. Most people thought I was out of my mind, but
Who would have
it
ever
somehow worked.
thought?
Huh?
Who would have ever thought? Right?
Yeah. Go figure. Now look around. Yeah,
You
right.
were ahead of your time, Doc.
Yeah. That's the story of my life. So Street Sense has been an evolutionary process, I think, in terms of the additions of the book.
Mhm.
How did you come to get involved with Jeff and Principles of Emergency Medical Dispatch?
Right, Jeff Clausen. Yeah. Oh, that was a great story. So when I started writing for GEMS in 1979, I had the honor, honestly, it was, of having more cover articles than anyone else for the first few years. And I was very, very active. So of course, when EMS Today came along, I was always speaking at that. And I started getting to talk at conferences and developed a whole sideline on that level. But so I was at a conference in 1984, probably, maybe 83. And I had been reading in GEMS, of course, about this new thing about priority dispatch. And having been a dispatcher in 1977, and my training literally in 1977 was watch another dispatcher on days for a week, and then they set you loose. Like, what? And so I worked days for a while, so that at least my supervisor was across the room. And it was an open counter dispatch center with telephones with cords and dials, and we had 3 radios separately for fire, police, and state patrol, 3 different radios, microphones for those. And literally in that first couple of weeks, like new bells and whistles would start going off that didn't happen to go off on my week of training. And I go like, I don't even know what this is, you know, so it was not good. So when I read about this guy, Jeff Clausen has like a system for dispatching. And by then I had also been working on the field a lot, and I had been sent lights and sirens all the way across Denver on a hangnail once, really, and on the hiccups another time. And I thought, really? And so this guy is saying, like, why don't we ask a few more questions and send the right response instead of just sending the Marine Corps every time someone calls 911? And I thought, this is brilliant. So I saw him at a conference and I met him finally. I said, why don't you have a book? This is important, you need one. And he hemmed and hawed. And I said to myself, I think he doesn't have time or maybe the knowledge of how to write a book. So I said, would you be interested in chatting? So we got together and drafted the very first edition of the Priority Principles of Emergency Medical Dispatches, this little tiny green book right there. And yeah, so that got him launched, and I was really, really very proud to be part of that. I think we lost Doc. Did we lose Doc, Christy? Uh-oh. I see that we're still live. There we go. I think we lost Doc. Keep talking.
Technology, keep going.
Yeah, so anyway, Jeff Clausen and the priority dispatch model has changed the world, has literally changed the lives and saved lives repeatedly, both in terms of asking the right questions, sending the right response, not having people using lights and sirens quite as much, so that you don't have people at risk in traffic. We know that traffic is one of the best ways to get dead in this business. And so I have now, there's copies of the books in German and Chinese, and it's gone worldwide. Super, super proud of Jeff Clausen and all the amazing work he's done. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Had a question go in and out of my head, of course, because now I'm in the spotlight.
You're doing 2 things at once. Can I share with everybody while you're trying to figure out where Doc is gone?
Yes.
because another opportunity has recently come up to write another book. Should I chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, let's dive into it. He's just coming back online, it looks like here.
There we go.
There we
There
go.
you go.
There we
Hey,
go. Sorry.
you had to go to the bathroom, right?
The joys of technology.
I know. Welcome back. So I finished telling the story about Clausen and how honored I was to be part of that, trajectory of change the world stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you missed. So.
Did you by any chance bring anything to Jeff's way of thinking about how stuff ought to be done in terms of changing perspective at all?
Oh, probably, no doubt. He already was working very closely with the paramedics and the fire department in Salt Lake City in those days. So,
Yeah.
and he'd ridden along a lot, and he had done his residency at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, and so he was not oblivious to our world, but he hadn't been of our world. So,
Yeah.
and I think being able to write the book and he had a really, really good solid system. In fact, in those days when we wrote that book was 1980. It came out in 1980, I want to say 6 or so, maybe 1987. Computers, as you know, were still just in the front end of their beginning stages, and all of the whole dispatch system was in little flip cards. They'd have a little physical flip card system, and depending on what questions you had, what questions you're initially hearing, you would flip to the card and then ask the questions
Right.
on the card, and then it went all into the electronic world. And I didn't actually stay up with writing subsequent editions because it's just a full-time job for them to keep that going. And I know that they've gone into emergency principles of emergency fire dispatch and principles of emergency police dispatch as well. So they've gone into the fire and the LE law enforcement side of things in addition to the medical side. So I'm super proud of that whole thing because it has changed the world and saved lives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see, we're in a very interesting environment with EMS at the present time because of the pandemic. I know in law enforcement, the numbers are dwindling. People are taking early retirement. People are hanging it up.
Mm-hmm.
There's other stuff going on. I was stunned when I read the other day that 2 paramedics in Arkansas were shot, and one of the paramedics returned fire and killed the shooter.
Right.
I thought, that's a little different.
Yeah, I did this. I had the same reaction. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
So where do you see our world changing from that standpoint, from number one, safety, from the standpoint of stress involvement? I mean, I was just blown away by that article when I saw it.
Well, a couple of things. Yeah.
Where do you see us headed?
Right now with COVID, first of all, I just hold all of my brothers on ambulances right now, every single day. I'm not running calls, and you are. And that is work that is unbelievably hard, and I know it. And just physically, just being in that much gear all the time. My heart goes out to the people that have been stressed by this pandemic. And I just actually wrote a blog the other day, and I tried to get the New York Times to take it in the Huffington Post, and nobody did. So I just put it up on my own website, which is katedernocoeur.com, if anybody wants to peek at my blogs. But it talks about the fact that with all of the adulation right now of, oh, you first responders, you're our heroes, we love you. That is appreciated, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I'm also hearing about too many places that are not covering their EMS personnel because like workman's comp might not cover your COVID because you might not have gotten it on the job. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I get upset and I get kind of excited about the fact that this cannot keep going. People are leaving the industry in droves. And if they're here at all, it's because they're passing through on their way to PA school, or they're passing on their way through to nurse practitioner or nursing, if that. And I know one guy today at the search and rescue group that I'm in, he used to be a medic and now he's in construction. He said, boy, it's a lot less stressful. So I think that we're in a bad way right now. We don't have a national voice. We don't have anything like the police and fire have as far as longstanding tradition and the unions and the brotherhood that goes with that. We are notoriously independent. We are in our ambulances 2x2 or maybe 4x4 in fire EMS divisions. But you look at the fire department in New York, their EMS division guys are treated like second-class citizens.
Yep.
And by the way, most of them are, interesting, female or people of color. And they're treated poorly. And they get 47 cents on the dollar to what the firefighters are making. And they run way more calls. What is wrong with this picture? And de Blasio wants to cut their, and now their governments are saying, well, our budget's running out, so we're going to have to cut. And like, you're still going to have the same number of calls. How are you going to do that when people are already on mandatory overtime and leaving in droves? So it's horrible. It's a bad time. This initiative, the 2050 initiative for EMS that Mike Taigman and all those guys put together, we got to come up with something because it's bad. So I'm sad. I'm very sad about that. It's a noble calling what we do. And when you are able to pursue it in a way that keeps you from being that toasty person after a year or two, it is amazing. I also know, on the other hand, at least 3 people this year who are going to be in their 50th year on the streets, 2 of them as paramedics. And I'm like, it can happen. And how did they get there? So that leads, you asked about stress. Safety is an issue, obviously. Let me address the I saw that report of the medics that got shot at, and the guy draws his concealed weapon and takes care of the assailant. Well, I don't think you can argue with the fact that maybe he did save his life and his partner's life, but boy, I'm super, super leery of us getting a reputation of carrying guns, because it's just going to get worse. It's already bad. I think I saw another report today that a couple of guys were shot at. There's been 2 robberies in the same housing project in New York City in the last couple weeks. We're vulnerable, and I don't know the answer. I don't think bulletproof vests are the answer. I think a lot of it has to do with dropping back and having very, very succinct and good training on what we now call situational awareness, the safety. In my book, I go into like super detail, not just to like, ooh, stay safe, because the thing we do in training is, and I get it, you're teaching people how to become EMTs or paramedics, and it's like, okay, first thing, you arrive on the scene, the first most important thing, and I'm grateful that now it is your safety. That's the first most important thing. But so now, as students do scenarios, they come in, they come into the room, the teacher's there, the situation's there, they go like, I've entered the room and the scene is safe, and now I'm going to do my stuff. And instead, we need to teach them to say, you are never done checking for your safety, not until you get off that ambulance at the hospital and cleaned up and ready for the next call. So I think the attention to safety is drilled into us to be something you check off in your head, like right after you walk through the door with your gloves on. And we got to stop that, So
Are there weapons?
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I talked a suicide down.
Right.
And my friend, who was the sheriff, came in a little while later and he said, oh, by the way, I need to show you something. He lifted up the cushion on the couch, and there was a loaded weapon.
Exactly.
And I thought, that was special.
Not bad. Yeah. No,
So,
we've a lot of us have dodged those bullets, to use a phrase, but and been lucky. So I think that my new initiative, which I'm super, super excited about, is the stress component. This is a stressful job, and it's I've had the conversation was not started about stress until Jeff Mitchell came along in the early 80s. My 2 Jeffs, Jeff Clausen and Jeff Mitchell, I was also all over Jeff Mitchell. I'm like, oh my God, this is an amazing thing you're doing. This critical incident stress. Let's define it. Let's do critical stress, incident stress management and debriefings. And there was a name and there was an acronym and wow, you know, so it was great. And now 2020, you know, 40 years later, I've just been introduced this year to what I believe is going to be a game changer in the field of how we cope with the things that are hard in this business. It's not going to be like that big flashy, like one bad incident and it's unusual. You know, they say a critical incident is a situation that's unusual even for you. And of course, we're used to seeing dead people and people bleeding and people with, you know, body parts dangling in various ways that they shouldn't. And so to the general public, that's a critical incident, but to us, it's kind of everyday work. But when we see something that's unusual, we get hit with symptoms and stressors and reactions and things you can measure, actually physiologically and emotionally, which we've long called critical incident stress. This new model that I've been introduced to is, and why it's a game changer, is that it's taking the whole conversation back a few steps to say, yes, those situations that I was just talking about happen. Of course they do. But there's a whole lot of other stuff as well. And naming it and finding a way to see it as an injury. It's a stress injury. And this woman, Laura McGladrey, and I will be writing a book together. Yay! Because she doesn't want to write a book just the way Jeff Clausen didn't want to write a book. So I am thrilled to be partnering with her to write the book. I want it to be done 10 years ago. But she talks about, you know, stress injury being a thing that you can look at with our mindset in a way that we go, oh, injuries, we know how to do injuries. We know how to like do a broken leg, that's an injury. We know how to do like diabetes, that's an injury of the pancreas and that whole system. And we do injuries, but it gets away from the whole mental health part that everybody's hated ever since the day one. We don't want to be crazy. And the thing is, we're not crazy. We are not crazy for the things that the responses that we have to the things we see. We are normal human beings being asked to do too much. And so learning to recognize not only those big events, but also the depletion injuries, the injuries that come as a result of loss of mission, or the stuff that just wears you down. That is all stress injury formation in one form or another. And there's a bunch of ways of talking about it with new nomenclature that is way less threatening and also uses for firefighters examples that firefighters can relate to. For example, you know, she says there's a continuum. You know, you start and you're in this like green zone. You're pretty happy. There's things you see when someone's in the green zone, and then there's yellow, and this is the continuum. And it's a military model. The military has this model, and it's all part of a wider conversation than hers. But she's the one I'm learning from. So you have green, there's yellow, there's orange, and there's red. It's sort of like hypothermia. It's like a nice warm day, and then it's a little chilly, and maybe you're shivering, and maybe you're starting, that's yellow, and then you're into the umbels, you're in the orange, and then you get to the red, and you are in so much trouble that you cannot save yourself. Someone else has to come and help you and get you out. And that's PTSD. That's all the way out where you shouldn't be. And if we had been a good team, we would never have let you get there. And for all sorts of reasons. It's a really cool conversation, and a lot of ways of speaking about it that, like I said, for the firefighters, it might be that sensation of like, I'm going into a burning building, my gear is good, my face shield, you know, everything's good, and my face is covered, I got everything good. And then you get in there, it's a little hot, and then you get out into a little yellow zone of, this is getting kind of scary, and maybe into an orange, like, oh, and then your low air alarm starts going off, and you know, you're running out of air. Same conversation with stress. You start okay and you get down to like, I'm running out of air. Or a medic, you know, you're running calls, you're doing good, and then you're running too many calls, you don't quite finish in time to really restock your bag, and you kind of get so busy that you'd never restock your bag, and then you get to a call where you don't have anything that you need in your bag. That's this continuum. It's beautiful. It is just crazy good, and I can't wait for everybody to see it. soon.
One of the things that I hope you and your co-author will address is for a young person to go into an EMS agency. What they have to have is a ticket that says, I've passed that course.
Right.
To go into a fire department these days, you need to have gone through the fire academy. At no point are any of these people ever screened to see if they have underlying psychological problems that might come out as a disease later on. And that's concerning.
Right. It
Um,
is. Yeah.
You know, I'll share some private offline stories with you, which you will find
We'll have a
interesting,
few
but
offline stories.
it's astounding.
It is. Yeah.
People we find, for example, some people get into EMS and firefighting because they have codependent personalities.
Right.
Okay, if that's the case, is this a place for them to be? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Or is there a way to work with them so they can name it and
exactly.
work with it and understand that that's what they're bringing and that's their baggage and they have choices?
Do you have any idea when this new publication is going to be finished?
ASAP.
Excellent.
Yeah. I have a daughter that was a public defender for 3 years. She needs this book. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, honestly, every time I'm just like, I feel so urgent. I won't make promises, but I'm hoping to have it drafted by April or so. And, you know, it'll then, that's just first drafted. So hopefully next year sometime we'll be sending it off to get printed.
Hey, we're not that old. You don't have a daughter that's a public defender. I don't have a 50-year-old son or a 25-year-old
right?
son.
Yeah, I don't feel that old, but you know, there's a lot. I have a new number arriving on Tuesday, so okay.
We are starting to run over our normally allotted time. Do you have any words of wisdom you want to share with us relative to stress and street sense and so forth that we might use for a closing?
Thanks for that. I believe that people can get into this line of work and thrive. I believe that people who get into this line of work don't want to go home broken. I believe that people who want to get into this line of work are willing to be peer support or helpers of those around them. It isn't a competition. You're partners, you're brothers. And I believe that it is not necessary to view it as oh, I'll just be here until I burn out and then I'll go do something else, because that is a waste. We have so much to offer. And the thing is, what you have to remember, even just the other day, I actually, you know, even when you have the opportunity to help somebody and you know what it is you can do for them, see, that's the difference. A lot of people want to help, but they don't know what to do. You have the training, guys. You're the ones who can actually pull out of your bag of tricks a way to make a person feel better. And if it's just a little hand holding for a person who's dying, that's not just anything. That is huge. So I think that for me, the real love of this work, the clinical part is very interesting. I'm always interested, you know, with, okay, there's a heart attack, all right, but if you go out on 1,000 chest pains, you're going to basically deal with chest pain, O2, maybe not even O2 anymore, IV, monitor, transport. But the thing is, so there's something that's always the same about the care that you give clinically. But all 1,000 of those situations had 1,000 different patients with 1,000 different logistical situations of how to get them in and out, or what's with the dog, or is the stove turned off? How's the family doing? What do you need to do to help the patient with your really good communication skills? That stuff to me is the gravy. And if you can view every situation where you have a chance to help somebody, even that person with the hiccups that time in Denver, is like, yeah, my internal eyeballs were rolling like, this is ridiculous. This isn't why I'm a paramedic. But it's like Yul Brynner, who went out on the stage 1,000 times, or I don't know, 4,000 times as the king in The King and I on stage. You know, he had to be sick of it on some level after about 1,000 times. But he always made it feel fresh for that audience. And that's what we do. That is what we have to do. It isn't us versus them. We are serving people who need our help. And when they've lost control of their life enough that they're calling 911, I don't know a lot of people that like to give up control of their life.
Yeah.
When they've done that and we can walk in and say, I'm here and I can help you, that is an honor. And there are a lot of skills that you have to build besides the clinical to do that well. And talk to, you know, the people who have done it for more than, 2 years. Our veterans now are 3-year veterans. It's like, you're not a veteran, you're still new. But that's kind of where we've gotten to. We need to fix some of those things. But I believe that what we do is as important as it gets. And it's a gift that you give yourself, and it's a gift that you give to the people you care for.
Excellent. Great closing words.
And
Kate,
if you get old enough, you can be part of the EMS Museum, which we are. And if you get interested enough, you can subscribe here so that we can have a permanent home on YouTube, because this stuff matters, guys.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned museum. Yeah, we are a museum, but I think what we are trying to collect is the wisdom of those that have been doing this for a while, and put it in some place where it is there permanently.
It's great.
I happen to be wearing a jacket that previously belonged to somebody you and I knew and loved, Norm McSwain.
Oh, I thought I recognized it. He always had black leather on.
Yep.
Yep.
I thought you might get it. And I am crushed that we never sat down and did something like this with Norm.
Right.
Or Mike Rothenberg, for example.
Right. I have great Mike Rothenberg stories.
These were some of the geniuses that helped us grow this profession. And what we're trying to accomplish here with the museum is to capture some of that and keep it permanently available.
It's great.
So again, thanks for your time, Kate. It was great to see you.
My pleasure.
I just wish it were face-to-face instead of Zoom face-to-face.
I know. All right, let's get through COVID so we can have an actual hug. I miss hugs.
Absolutely. I'm with you.
My poor dog. She gives me all
we're going to promote your website. I've got it sitting here to my right, as a matter of fact, and we'll make sure that people paid attention to that, because there's some really good stuff on there. And
I have a lot in the library. I'm archiving a lot of my old articles, including the We Save Lives myth, which was one of my most famous essays.
Outstanding. Great.
Yeah. So thanks.
Christy,
so when they subscribe to you, they should subscribe to me. That's great.
Here comes my keeper. She's back online.
Absolutely. We dropped your website link in the comments here, so hopefully everybody watching will scroll through the comments and click on your website. A couple weeks ago, I was scrolling through it and enjoyed reading a number of the posts, so thank you for that. We also have a couple of young viewers tonight.
Do we?
And when last you and I chatted, I asked you this question, and I'm going to ask it again. It's not a test to see if you remember what you said, but if you have a new answer, that would be fantastic. Those just learning about what EMS is and the role that we all play in our communities, and thinking about it as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, potential career path, or looking at getting involved. What do you have to say to the next generation? What words can you impart on?
Oh, totally. My absolute conviction is that if you can keep your curiosity alive, and if you can commit to yourself to be a lifelong or perennial learner, you are never done. You will never be done with this. You will always have something more to learn. Whenever you have an interaction with another person and it went well, think about, whoa, I wonder why that went so well. Maybe it's how I was standing. Maybe I was standing in a non-threatening way. Maybe I was standing in a very solid way. Just picking it apart and never losing sight of the fact that you can always learn something from each situation, good or bad. Stuff you will do, stuff you won't do. So be curious and keep that curiosity alive.
Let me throw one other thing out, Kate, if I may.
Uh-huh.
These are the most valuable tools you have in EMS. First, because these are the things you use to perform the skills we're taught how to do.
Right.
But they're also the things that we can reach out and touch people with when they are in crisis, when they are in pain, when they're in a lot of fear.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I've learned, having been doing this for far too long.
And I had to learn how to touch with compassion, I call it. I grew up in a household that was like, whoa, no, don't touch. We were not a touchy family. And I had to learn how to do that. It was like you'll read about it in the book. I had to specifically like screw up my courage and like, oh my God, touch a person, you know?
Yeah.
But it absolutely can make all the difference.
Yep.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you. And also putting down your technology and looking at the person. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How's that, Kirsty?
I think that's good. And I think I would add trust your gut. There is something that you are always going to inherently have in you that follow that path. And again, reach out and touch people nicely.
Yes,
with compassion.
Appropriately.
Love.
Appropriately.
Yeah, appropriately.
Yes.
And trust yourself. Trust yourself to take the risk that will save a life. Be responsible, but trust yourself.
Yep.
And that's coming from the museum curator that does a lot of stress management help with patients. So I think I'm very, very excited to see this book come out. It is the passion of mine. And for those watching that may be feeling stressed today or any other day, just remember that not only are your brothers and sisters in arms, so to speak, there for you, but your family and friends are too. And they may just not know how to ask to support you. So don't be afraid to ask. If you need a quiet place or a reflective place to go, find a museum. Museums are great for that. They're opening their doors for all health and wellness type programs. If you have any questions about that or want to know what museums are best for that, reach out to us. We are partnering with a number of museums on ways to support first responders through museum activities. So there's a whole new realm opening up, and anybody, old, new, first year, 50th year, it's for you. Be part of this museum, be part of your local museums, art galleries. They're there to help. I'm just checking comments here. Hi, Carl. Yes, you can catch us anytime. We'll stay archived on Facebook here. We also had greetings from New Zealand. So hi back.
I saw that. Can I interrupt? If the greetings from New Zealand involve a man named Ian Hay, he is one of my 50-year people. And I hope it is Ian. He's a good dear friend. Yeah.
It is Warwick Manning.
Oh, Warwick Manning too. I remember him when I was in New Zealand. Hello. Oh my gosh.
So it is great that everybody is tuning in. I'm buying time because I keep seeing people log in. So if you have one more story, dish us out with one more story for those latecomers here.
Okay, I have a Michael Rothenberg story.
Do it.
Which people might enjoy. Mike Rothenberg was a resident in Denver before he went off to be famous. And he was quite an enthusiastic resident. And I actually remember this call so clearly because I really don't like trouble breathing calls. I don't like when people can't get air. And we went into this house and this guy's sitting up having the fulminating pink frothy sputum of pulmonary edema. And I don't like those calls. But anyway, this guy comes in full scrubs, good looking scruffy, which Michael was not known for his always looking stand up. He was kind of a scruffy looking kind of guy. So this guy comes, and I hadn't really met him yet, right? And so he sort of comes by me, and I'm just getting in the door, kind of assessing what's going on and taking it in a little bit. And this guy comes roaring by me. In those days, we had this thing called precordial thump, where you took and went boom on the sternum. And he went in and he went boom on the sternum for a precordial thump. And I looked at this guy and I said, maybe we should check for a pulse first. And he slinked out of the room, and it turned out it was I said, there's a few things we should have probably done before the precordial. He was still breathing, for heaven's sake. He was so mortified all the rest of the time I knew Michael. He would always bring that up, going like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, because he was just a neighbor and he saw the excitement and thought he could come help because he was a doctor. You know, so I have a big whole section of street sense talking about getting along with the doctors on scenes. and we went back on that story many times, Mike and I. Yeah.
I sorely miss him.
Yeah.
I really
He
do.
was a character. Yeah.
Good
There's
people.
so many good people out there. I mean, honestly, last year when I put it up on Facebook, I was just kind of almost like just a silly, almost off the cuff question. I put it out. Hey, is there room in the world for a 4th edition of Street Sense? I was just curious to see what people would say. And I mean, oh my God, I got messages from Peter Pons and like big deal people out there. And I didn't even know you watched me. And I got like 400 responses saying yes, 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 yes. And I'm like, oh, guess I should do this. So I'm really, really happy for that support. I don't know that I would have done it again without it. So,
Great.
yeah.
That is awesome.
Okay, Christy, I'm ready to go get some dinner, my dear.
Yeah, I think it's dinner time for us too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, you guys. I'm honored, and I love you, and yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thanks very much for joining us, Kate.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, everybody. We are actually going to be live January 1st, so don't party too hard on the 31st. Catch up Gary Ludwig with us on
good. Yeah.
January 1st. Check Facebook for the times because I've completely dropped the ball and didn't pull that up. But we will have that, and we have a full lineup going into next year. If you want to participate, please drop us a line.
Is that Gary on January 1st?
It is.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
we're going to be talking to Gary Ludwig, who's the immediate past president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs.
Yep.
And when I first met Gary, I won't tell you how long ago, he was chief paramedic in the St. Louis Fire Department.
And a good man.
Yeah, and good people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I've got
That's
great
our next.
Yeah, for you, other people. Yeah.
That's our next coffee section.
Yes, hold your mug up again. Let's there you go. If you want one, visit us on Facebook. We have links there. We just added an EMS artifact collection, so not just t-shirts anymore. For those artifacts watching, check it out. Christmas is 5 days away. Order 1 week. I don't know what day it is anymore.
Next Friday.
Excellent. Well, happy holidays to everybody. We'll let everybody go have dinner. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Mwah.